Yeah, this is teaching time.
It is teaching time. And
Yeah.
Kristen's in California, which means
Oh, okay.
her day off. So, yeah. So, did you all get the agenda that I sent?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Super.
So official.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Natasha, what is behind you, Natasha?
It is the human body. You want to see the full?
Is this okay?
The full skeleton?
Sure.
Where she sits when she knows
Is it politically correct? Is it?
It
Okay?
is.
Okay.
Literally that's what it is. My brother is a doctor, so
okay.
he likes to put random stuff when he comes to visit. So we have a human body up there. I'm assuming for his son.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. I like it. Yeah. All right. Well, let's check in. Let's do a temperature check. How are we doing? How are we feeling? Susan, do you want to start only because you're in my upper left corner? Not to put you on the spot. You can defer.
Yeah, that's fine.
You can defer.
I've got a lot of life going on over here, so I'm kind of mentally occupied with that. Some tough, some good, and a lot of work in between. So I think this is the season. Fall tends to be the season for a lot of change and transition. I have a ton of work with different contracts that I'm working on, and VCIs are getting underway. And so far, so good. Some really interesting projects. So I'm actually excited to work on them because they are tapping into my creative side that I can blend with the educator side, and so that's kind of an obscure yet accurate description of how I am right now.
Yeah. Do you want to just do a brief synopsis about your teams, because you do have some really interesting teams this year?
Sure. So I'm working with 2 teams at Fountain Valley. The first is they call themselves the Chapter 1 Design Team. So they have this course that they've been teaching to freshmen forever that was designed by an English teacher a while back to elicit team bonding and so on for freshmen to feel more comfortable. Well, the school has changed, the teachers have changed, the climate in the school has changed, the culture has changed. So this set of teachers is really hoping to cater this course more toward the needs of what the students actually want. They're having a tough time with group dynamics. There's 53 of them. There are 2 lead teachers and 2 kind of auxiliary teachers. And so there are a lot of dynamics we're navigating, not only classroom management, but consistency within the teacher team. So we're kind of working at different levels. Mostly, though, we're trying to figure out what the point of it is. That's what we spent yesterday. That's what we spent yesterday talking about. What are we actually doing here? So kind of a simple yet big question for them to try and answer. And I think when they decide what it is that they want, the flow will be a lot easier. So we're starting backward using that kind of backward design mentality. The other team is well, I have Pia in Denver. So sorry, let me go back. So Fountain Valley, Chapter 1. I'm forgetting what the other team is calling themselves right now.
Isn't it just the Capstone team?
Yeah, I guess Capstone team. But they are trying to design a full-on capstone project for their students. So that's a big one. And we're just taking that step by step, piece by piece. And then I have Pia in Denver, who I've been working with for a couple of years, and we are doing. Partly, I'm just somebody she can talk to, I think, which is great. I think she just needs to vent sometimes. And the big thing that she's rolling out is a 3-year curriculum for her Spanish students who are. She has students ages 5 through 6th grade. So she's got her hands in a lot of different pockets, but it's a Montessori school. So we're rolling out a curriculum for a 3-year Montessori Spanish program.
Well, but now she's 56 students. That's a little bit out of control for one teacher, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But
and she's gone through it. Actually, she connected with some folks that we know in Cuba this summer. Anyway, she's doing a lot of personal development and learning where to set boundaries on that too, because she's definitely this woman that wants to do everything out of the goodness of her heart, but she's realizing that boundaries are a good thing to have when people are asking you to do a lot. So
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. Who
Yeah,
else?
Thank you.
What happened?
Go ahead.
Hey.
Did you say who else?
Yeah, who else? Yeah,
Oh,
wait,
I
wait.
thought you said Fowell. And also, I was like, he's not
Oh,
saying
you're trying to
anything.
push it off on me.
I thought that's what you said. I can go. It doesn't matter.
I will go. I'm not opposed.
Everything is honestly, everything is pretty great. I really have no complaints. It is very hectic.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back from a hectic trip last week and then jumping in, I literally had to teach that night when I came back. So I haven't really had a stopping point yet.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is just hectic. Various contrasts, looking to add another one soon. And literally just enjoying this part of life.
Good.
I did a really good job of setting boundaries earlier, so just making sure that everything is still flowing in the right direction. Erin has left the meeting.
I thought jumped off. She'll be back. Probably got that off.
I'm trying to think of anything else.
Well, we had established a good, exciting BCI with her at the Dalton School, and then they just backed out, which is a bummer.
Ooh.
But we do have another one, a lower school one at Friends of Mullica Hill, which is a Friends school, a Quaker school, which I think.
Ooh, that's gonna be fun.
I'm still waiting for the last piece of interest inventory to come in, and I'll send that through to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Right. Oh, well.
Hello. I do. I have very little to report, only because I haven't started yet, but I'm excited to start. But I have started something else, and that's why I'm in a different space. I took on the role of executive director of a school for children with autism, and I have, in terms of seasons, it is summer here. And summer lasts all year long in New Orleans, and I'm feeling that summerness. That's, I guess, if you want to follow that, that's how I feel. Hot, miserable. Jumping into running a school after having not run a school for a good while has been. You probably noticed my eyes are a little red. I haven't slept in the last 2-3 weeks, and I've been putting in 12, 14-hour days. So it's nice to reconnect with you guys and to sort of get back. I'm finally starting to find a little equilibrium. What is exciting is that we have a very small student population, and we are all PBL, we are all community-based, and we are all ABA, which, if you're not familiar with, is an approach used with children with autism, helping them with behaviors. ABA, PBL, and community is where we are. And so I get to apply and use a lot of what I talk about with my team. So it's ideal. So I can speak from the trenches to folks in the trenches. So I'm excited about that. So even though it's perpetual summer in New Orleans, and in terms of where I am seasonally right now, I feel really good about where I am and what I'm doing and how it relates to the work that we do. I may be calling you guys independently for therapy, especially if any of you have experience in the special education world. I have kids from age 3 through, I think my oldest student is 28.
Wow.
So yes, it's kind of crazy, but wonderful. And anyway, so hopefully I will stay functioning, I guess. And, anyway, so that's where I am. I'll be working with the middle school and hopefully someone that we met this summer in Costa Rica, and that would be fantastic. And so anyway, that's where I am.
Yeah, and I heard from her this morning, the head of the school, and she said, her response was that the team is feeling like they're running up against the wall and they're having trouble planning. Cause they're along with Susan's VCIs, they're designing a program to classroom thing. They're doing a program in Costa Rica, and they want to embed that into the curriculum in some way, but they don't know how to do that, and so they're struggling so hard with the design of it, and they're not sure how coaching can fit into that when they're already struggling. And so my response was, this is exactly when you need to bring a coach in.
Mm-hmm.
New ideas, you need new perspectives, you need new experiences, you need somebody to hold you accountable and share with you planning strategies so that you can move forward. So hopefully she will defer to our wisdom and not necessarily the apprehension of the faculty, and just dive in and make that partnership happen. So fingers crossed we'll hear back from them today about that.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, I am feeling like hurricane season, if that's going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would have been a better, more accurate for me.
I was talking to Erin about this yesterday, feeling like I'm spiraling wildly out of control with all of the things that we have going on this end, kicking off all the VCIs, chasing people down, planning Purpose Summit and all the global gatherings, and trying to keep all of that in a manageable space. So trying to figure out my balance of how much attention I give to things so that I don't give anything too little attention, if that makes sense.
Yep.
That does.
And so that kind of rolls me into some information about the VCI where, Natasha, this won't mean a whole lot to you because this is your first year with us, but our VCI numbers are down pretty significantly this year from last. I wasn't expecting that. I had full confirmation from people that they were going to continue, and then they ended up not for various reasons. But I think part of my hypothesis is that they as school leads are not seeing the value of this program. That doesn't mean there's not value in the program, and it doesn't mean that the teachers aren't feeling the value. It means that that value is not filtering up to the administration, who is not making for it financially. So one of my goals then this year is to be more present and visual for the school, the administration. And so what that's going to look like on one hand is for me to follow up with them every month with a monthly VCI snapshot of what is happening with each team in each school. And so the way that I'm going to try to gather that information so that I don't have to bother you all is to individually each month send out a very short survey to all of the participants that says, basically, are you working towards your goals? Are you feeling supported? What is one thing that you took away this month, and where do we have room to improve? And so I'm going to take those questions, put it into a survey and send it out, and then take that information that they give to me and share it with the administration in some sort of pretty document. If you have any other, any ideas of things that I should be asking, I haven't really fleshed that out yet. Again, this is no check-in necessarily on the work that you're doing with the teams. It's more about the work that the teams are doing collectively with you. So hopefully that will help with this little bit of a snafu, we're going to call it, or speed bump, or whatever we want to call it for this year. But we'll see. And the other part of it is that I just need to be more visible with you. I need to be more visible with the teams. I need to be more visible with the administration. So those are my personal goals for this year.
Cool.
I also think, Shayna, that the piece that you were talking about during the retreat, I wish you'll pull this out. They're measuring the impact piece, that big question that you wanted us to help facilitate and to figure out how we can measure our success and be more impactful in that regard. I think that data will translate to administration. Because I know in schools, they see numbers more than, I won't say more than anything, but they're very numbers driven when it comes to success. And that's how they translate the amount of money that they spend in certain areas. So I think that big question that you had for us, and even for, for yourself, will be really huge for the end of this year, next year, 2020, whatever.
Absolutely. And that has been tabled just a little bit until I can get through these things, but I'm going to dive back into that again, probably in November, a little bit more specifically. I've gathered some resources about how other programs and organizations are measuring impactive coaching. And so I'll bring those to the table, but maybe in November, we can use part of our coaches meeting to talk more specifically about that. But I think that would be
Sounds good.
And then the other thing I was going to talk about with the VCIs was, and some of you have already kicked off, like Susan, you have definitely already are rocking and rolling, but I've been thinking a little bit about the weekly versus biweekly meetings in the beginning of the VCI, because those first couple sessions are primarily about interest inventory and goal setting and action planning and, what are we doing? And I'm just wondering if we guarantee the school 20 sessions a year. If we can front load a little bit of that and meet once a week, maybe for the first 2 or 3 weeks, because if you're looking at your first session is, nice to meet you, here's your interest inventory and goal planning. Then 2 weeks later, you're talking about what do you really want to focus on with PD this year? And then 2 weeks later, you're talking about where is the curriculum. You're into the fall already, and you haven't really done anything yet in terms of like anything of subject curriculum. So it's something to think about. All you need to do is make sure that you're hitting that marker of 20 meetings. So if you do 3 or 4 in that first month, then that's fine, because there will be times of the year when you're not going to meet that. November, December are pretty light. March and April are pretty light, because of spring break. So it's something to think about. I'm going to do that with my teams this year so that we can get moving, because it is already October. And if we are going to try to get them to do something in the fall, we need to get them to move along quickly if that's part of your objective.
Yep.
And then interest inventory and goals, just making sure that you're checking in with that pretty frequently with your team. Making sure that they remember what their goals were and that they're moving towards those, and that you are aware of those, like the ones on the interest inventory that came back as 4s and 5s in terms of what they really want to know regarding professional development, and incorporating that into the work that you're doing with them, so that mid-year and end of year, when you said you were really interested in learning about like formative assessment planning and blah, 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 did you touch on that this year? They can say, yeah, we really did, and here's what I learned, or, whatever.
Yep.
So not gathering data just to gather data, but using that data that we get from them to make sure that we're meeting them where they are in terms of their needs. That makes sense?
Yeah.
It does.
Okay. Any questions on that or thoughts? Okay. All right. Well, let's dive into coaching models, shall we? Natasha, do you want to talk a little bit about your beautiful piece right here?
You're funny. Sure, I can. So I like to say the inspiration guys came to visit me, and I was just thinking about how I actually coach on a larger scale, and then how I coach with teachers, how I coach with clients. I do coaching on a variety of levels, and everything came from a place of grounding. That's why I called it the grounding effect. But within the grounding effect, when I coach, I tackle what has happened, which is the past. We talk about the now, which is the present, and then the future piece is, how are you going to take this and what are you going to do with it when we're not together? So I know I put on there like visiting the past, embracing the present, and welcoming the future. So it's called the grounding effect, because one thing about grounding, if you're not familiar with it, it is a space of centering. It's a space of presence, it's a space of awareness. And I would like, if it's a partnership, then both of us have to be present, both of us have to be aware, and both of us have to be in a space of active listening. So everything is on a spectrum of grounding. It starts with a grounding to know. And that's like the thing that everyone does. No, it's the check-in. What's going on? How are you feeling? In a space of confusion, or like in a hurricane or tornado space, then that will be a space for me to, let's just breathe for a little bit. Let's just do a quick meditation. What happened? Sorry, you're sharing it. Oh, okay.
Good.
Yes, great. Hello. Yeah. Can you make it bigger a little bit?
You need
if they need to.
iBuyDirect.com, sister.
But you're so funny. So basically, it's a space where we are centering in order to start the grounding piece. So that's when we talk about what happened in the last sessions. Where are you in relation to your goals? So we're making sure that we're staying goal-centered and goal-oriented. And then we talk, what are we going to work on for that day? And then we move to grounding to observe. The grounding to observe and the grounding to engage may flip-flop depending on what's going on for that particular session and what they want to get out of the session. But that's if I'm observing something, then I will be observing it. But I also do something with behavior observing, which is when they're speaking, what are their successes, what are their challenges, what am I hearing, what am I seeing, what am I not hearing, what am I not seeing. And if we bring data to the table, which I hope we do, depending on what we're working on, what is the data actually showing, and what are the implications of that data? The engaging piece is, let's work together. If this is a true partnership, if this is I think that's what our mission or vision is for World Leadership School, for our coaching model, then let's engage, let's work together. Do I need to model something? What are our shared resources? What are we discussing? But also, who are your resources? So not only am I your resource, but actually in that 1 week or 2 week gap, who are your other resources? What other resources do I need to pull, or what other resources that you actually need that you may need to find? So the goal of this model as a whole is autonomy of one's learning, growth, and pedagogy. And then from engaging goes to grounding to reflect. So you're still in this grounding space, and we already know what reflecting is, so I don't have to explain that. But we go into this reflecting space. But one question I always like to ask, even in the end of reflecting, is how can I best support you further? Because that lets them know that if this is a partnership, I'm not here just because someone told me to be here because of a paycheck, whatever the case may be, but I'm here for you. I'm here for the growth of your kids. I'm here for the growth of your pedagogy. I'm here for your growth of a personal development as well. So it gets them to think about how can I better support them in this role? And that's also an evaluation check for me on spot. So if I'm not doing what they want me to do, they can say, hey, let's do less of this and more of this. And that way I don't have to wait until a week later for them to tell me what's wrong. It's like my own end of, what do they call it in education? Is it end of ticket or something like that?
Exit ticket.
Exit ticket, yes.
Exit
it's kind of like my
yeah.
personal exit ticket. And then it goes to grounding to grow and soar, which is like the best piece. You're letting your goals and your focus speak for itself and putting our plans into effect for the next time. So the whole process of grounding is the past, the present, and the future to make sure that they have autonomy of most of, if not all things.
Very nice. I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really like the engage and reflect piece too. I think that's really important in terms of diving in and laying it out for your team and making sure that they are feeling supported, that they can talk through things, but they're also engaging in the work in a number of different ways, which I think is really important. I like that.
Thank you, Shayna.
Thank you. For your fanciness. All right, so there's a couple that, Alicia's in here. This is a little too big, y'all. I'm sorry. I can go maybe not. So this is Alicia's, and it is a little bit big. Come on. So hers is design, plan, implement, and monitor, and then evaluate and enhance. And I'm not going to speak for her. I'll let her, next time we see her, kind of explain this a little bit. But I also really like this one. It's very linear in terms of what is happening with the design of the curriculum. And we know that sometimes the design of the curriculum is not linear at all. But this shows, a longitudinal plan of here we are. Here's what we're going to do to make it happen. Here's how it's going to work. And then how did it work? So I really like that in terms of making sure that you're looking at the whole plan itself. Nathan's coaching model is about goal setting, learning, observation and data collection, and reflection. And then he's got a little bit information on underneath each of these that you all can read about what that might look like in real time when he's working with his teams. And then this was mine that I kind of was thinking about what that might look like. And so mine is drop in, develop, discuss, and debrief. So when looking at the arc of the coaching conversation or the model of the 60 minutes, for me, the drop-in is going to be about 10 minutes, starting each session with a temperature check, much like we did here, to figure out how they're doing, but also to figure out where they are with their energy level, their motivation, and their mind space. And also trying to use that time to get them to drop into this session and knowing that this time is for them and for them to try to be there and be present 100% with me for 45 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever that time frame is. Also use this time to revisit any homework or goals that that were established at the previous meeting and make sure that the work that we are getting ready to do aligns with the vision of the session. The develop piece is more about the thinking and developing the goals for the session, setting the tone for the meeting, having participants vocalize what they hope to achieve during the session, clarify any residual questions or concerns that they might have. And then the discussion time is really where the learning happens. And for me, that means that the coach or myself is going to introduce any of the new tips, tools, pedagogies that we are going to plan to use, to reflect on, and help the teacher understand those, where they might fit, and then where they might work in their classroom teaching. But it's called discuss because it's less of a directive coaching and more of a facilitative in terms of what do they need, what do they want, do they think this will work, where are their holes in their curriculum and their planning, and what can we do to fill those holes together.
Mm-hmm.
And then the debrief part is basically just that. Debrief the session by reflecting on the work accomplished during the session. Answer any more questions that they might have, ask for feedback. How did it go? How can I support you? Revisit their action plan. Agree on any external work, which Susan called field work, which I really like, better than homework. So much better. And get them to set the next meeting time and day in that session so that we know what we're doing next time. I think for me, the debrief part is really, really important. Sometimes I run right up to the clock and then it's over and they leave and it's hectic and they're on their way out and we never had a chance to debrief the session. So I think what I'm going to try to do is set my alarm on my phone to let me know 5 minutes before the ending is up, and then switch gears right then and into a reflection period and kind of a debrief of the session so that I don't run out of time with them.
I love your minutes. I kept looking at yours because of the minutes part. I know one thing, I know for me, my area of improvement is to ensure that basically what you just said about the reflection piece, and make sure that each part gets its own time. And I like the division of yours. I kept looking at that. I really like the way that you organized it.
Well, you know, sometimes when we know our teams well, and this happens longer, through the year, you can spend a lot of time just talking about things and not getting work done. So I'm certainly not going to be like, 10 minutes. Okay. Sorry. Cutting you off, Susan. But
you're right.
That I have given my 10 minutes to the drop-in. And so now I need to find a way to respectfully wrap that up and move on to the next session. That's what I'm thinking about anyway. Yeah.
Very, very nice.
Thank you. Thank you. Follow or Susan, I don't think I had yours. Did you want to talk about? Look at you.
Yeah.
Susan. Of course yours is pretty.
Yeah. I'll just say a couple things because I don't have a visual yet because one, I want to make sure that the model that I choose is the one that best fits the needs of my folks. And I just found out about my folks yesterday.
Yeah.
Or just got that. So mine is, I do love elements of everybody's. I think part of my thing is also finding something that works with your style.
Yes.
And making sure that you feel comfortable. It's sort of like teaching styles.
Yes.
And making sure that you feel comfortable in your own skin. I like elements of all. I did want to point out that in my new office, you'll see a little empty bookshelf right behind me. The only book that is there is the one that I'm about a third of the way through, which is a coaching book. So
good,
it's
right?
front and center. It's front and center. So by the if someone would like a visual, I like the spiral. I like the moving upward aspect. I don't want to feel like in terms of a visual that we're spinning wheels, but I want to feel like we're projecting upward. So that's the visual that I'm thinking about and working on.
Like that.
But I do love the idea of goal setting. I like the idea of reflection. I like the idea of revisiting and readjusting and creating a very, very tight and meaningful feedback loop so that the feedback is regular, it's consistent, and it's tailored to the work that's at hand. So breaking things down and, again, providing that very targeted or tailored feedback on a regular basis. But again, it's got to be wrapped around the particular needs of that group. So that's kind of where I am. I'm a little bit, but I can certainly by the end of next week have something a little more clear, but it's not that unlike what you have.
Yeah. I love that. I especially like that spiraling up visual.
Mm-hmm. I had a meeting with our teachers here the other day, and we had that discussion about what does progress look like? What is it? What is the end goal? Can you visualize it? And how are we going to get there? So it's that constantly, but it is forward and it is upward.
Building.
So anyway, yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Sometimes I'm such a concrete thinker that I'm like, this is my cyclical flow, right?
Yeah. And it's a great flow because
but I like that
have
also. Like, what are you building to? I think that's great.
Yeah.
And Susan,
it's like the scaffolding idea.
Yes.
Yeah, Susan.
Oh, we have similar colors. Go, Susan.
Oh, I like that.
So, yeah, I think this was actually a rather easy thing to do for me because this has been essentially what my brand logo has been for many years with concepts. So this is a non-industry specific model of change that is a broad outline or overview for how I envision change happening, in that the person always has to be at the center of it. So I try to remind myself in anything I'm facilitating, whether it's coaching with teachers or corporate clients or entrepreneurs or anything in between, that the person comes first, because there's always a way to connect the person with then the quote unquote local. So to me, local means interpersonal and community. So how do we then connect the person and the interests and the passions and so on with what is happening in community around us? And then once we understand how to communicate with community, our local community, we can then expand into the more global communities. So that can be taken literally as the world and creating change in the world, or just tying into influences and impacts that are outside of our local sphere. So how is what we are involved in as a local community connected then with the more global community values, concepts, global issues, etc. So I use this and I envision this in a state of constant flux as a ripple in water, that, the second we go out and we get too far out, we have to remember what is what's grounding us at the center, what is the purpose of what we're doing. So this is a very non-linear model, but I keep it in mind with everything I do, because for me as a facilitator, sometimes it's really easy to step right into the action and then forget about the stories that come into the room. So I've actually put myself along the way, especially with large group facilitation, to start in silence. And it's really awkward for most people, but it provides an opportunity for that personal, even if most of the content that we're focusing on is action steps and project base, it doesn't eliminate the core, the center, which is the individual in the room. So
interesting. All right.
I agree. Go, Susan.
Yeah, I love the ripple effect. That's nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's great. Yeah, thank you very much for all of that. I think that's great. And I'm looking forward to checking back in with those to see how that's showing up in your work with teams. And if after, employing this model, you realize that it needs to change at some point, I think that would be really interesting to reflect on that change as well, to see what sparked that and what that change might be. So we'll check back in with those and see how it goes in the future.
Too, is as I was describing that, and then looking at the other models, it might be interesting for us to have a linear model, like a logical, tangible model, and then more of a conceptual model that aligns with our, as Falwell said, teaching style.
Yeah. I mean, I think that could be very interesting as well. Because one is like more practical, right? Like these is going to happen in the team today. And the other is more philosophical in terms of this is what I bring and this is what you bring. And this is how we work together to make sure that everybody feels the equality in that, or the equity in that, which I really like.
Yeah.
So follow up.
Go ahead.
Nope, somebody was speaking.
Oh, no. I was thinking in terms of what Susan just said and that linear component, because you really do, if you have 20 opportunities, 20 interactions to reach those very, hopefully reasonably well-designed goals and SMART goals, there absolutely has to be a linear component of getting there. But I also like the idea of having a backdrop of a philosophical sort of underpinning of some sort. And that's what I think is really wonderful about that Susan's more conceptual piece is it could be the backdrop for that line that's maybe spiraling upward, but is definitely contained within a time frame and 20 sessions. So
Yeah.
that's all.
Well, and that's the hard part too, is that 20 sessions piece, right? Because what we are essentially saying is that our work with these teams is going to transform their work with students. Like that's what we're saying. And that's a lot to say in 20 minutes. Like if you were an instructional coach in a school, you would see your teams every week. You would be observing the teachers and debriefing with them right away. And you would be like, actually in the moments of learning and in the moments of reflection. And because we are set up in this model, which I definitely adopted, and maybe we'll reflect on this model and see if this actually is the most effective way to work with schools from a virtual platform. We are going to try to implement those observations this year, at least one or two where your coaches will record, your participants will record themselves teaching and share with you. Can look at their practice and see like who they are when they're with you in the VCI. Is that the same person that they are in the classroom? And is there a disconnect in what they're saying that they want to do with students and then what they're actually doing with students? I think that those are really valuable conversations to have with educators. It's just hard to do it on a virtual platform. But that being said, this is the way that we communicate with our teams. And so being really intentional and recognizing that I only have 20 sessions, so conversation matters, and going into each conversation in that mindset, I think is a way to set it up for success for ourselves and for the teachers that we're working with, and ultimately then the students who are at the center of all of this work. So I just put in here, planning for coaching conversation, thinking about when you're walking into that space, where does my client need to go and who do I need to be for them today? And that goes back to Susan's model even a little bit more. I think for me, planning out the linear or the cyclical nature of a conversation is much easier than determining who I am as a coach and then living that all the time. So I think that for me will take more work, but it's valuable work and something that obviously that I need to commit some time to. And then the arc of the coaching conversation is basically what all of us in one form or fashion talked about: checking in and chatting, creating a plan for the conversation, using the teacher also in that plan instead of, it is fine to come in, and I do this a lot, come in with my plan for the session, but allowing the voice of the teacher to have prominence over that. So if they're not in that space, then being able to pivot and shift and ask them what's on their mind, what might we do for you today that that you were not planned for. Checking in on previous commitments. How did that go? What did that look like? Reflections or whatever it is that you planned. Engaging in your coaching stances and approaches, just like you're learning. Determining next steps, and then reflecting on the conversation and asking for feedback. So pretty much when you look for what a coaching conversation looks like across whatever the coaching is, it's going to look something similar to that, making sure that you're covering all of your bases. Your model. Any other thoughts on that?
Now, it's interesting that all of our models thus far have pretty much all of these areas without us actually having that in front of our face, which is really cool to me.
One of the things that occurs to me is that this arc right here is not that unlike a really well-designed model lesson plan, where you're really talking about goal setting, you're talking about guided practice, and then independent practice, and then feedback on that independent practice, which is the assessment or evaluation, and then reflection by the participants. So it's not that far removed from the work at hand that most of our coachees our folks are doing in the classroom. So
exactly.
After talking with the Fountain Valley team yesterday, that I told you is trying to figure out what this course is. They just don't even know what it is. It's so inconsistent, and they're just kind of throwing things in there. And this is a suggestion that I had was, well, what is the framework for each session? Because if there is a certain amount of consistency, whether every other day or every other month, both the students and the teachers are going to know what to expect. structure brings freedom, right? They're going to know what to expect when they walk into that room. So we spent yesterday really working on, Shane, exactly what you had. Okay, what does the first 10 minutes of the session look like? What is the...
Uh-oh. What happened?
We lost your
voice.
Oh.
There you are.
There, you're back.
So whether or not the 13 and 14-year-olds dive deep in answering the question, the time for reflection is there. It's built in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just I think this in and of itself is a valuable tool to share with our teachers, because yes, hopefully there's some sort of structure, but maybe not. I think this is kind of a critical foundation piece.
And I thank you for asking us to do this. Honestly, it made me really reflect on what it is I do and put it into a concise, clear format. So I know what I do.
Sure.
And I think I do it fairly well, but to have it in like a very clear, I can pass it on, like Susan just said, and share it with somebody in one pager is really powerful.
Yeah.
So I do thank you for having us do this exercise.
Yeah. Well, nice job. And I'm sort of in the same way. You know, I've been doing this work for a couple years now, and I know what I do, and I just go in and I do it, and it feels great. But then when I'm asked to like define what it is that I do, I'm like, oh man, I need to think that out, you know? It's kind of like that core values activity that we didn't get a chance to do, but hopefully we'll do it sometime. I think we all know, like we can say, yeah, I know what my values are. But then when you're asked to define them and you know, like limit them to 3 or 5, then it becomes a little bit, for me anyway, more muddy in terms of what are, you know, like what are they? Where do they show up in my life? Where do they show up in my work? And into the work that I'm doing reflecting those. So much of the same model. It's just about deep reflection, self-reflection on knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it, and staying true to that along the way, I think is important. So switching gears just a little bit for the last 10 minutes. I just got back from this phenomenal PD myself it was called the Art of Coaching Institute, which was based off of the book that you all got this year. It was a 2-day coaching conference, basically. It was great. I got lots of tools. I got lots of more strategy, scaffolding for that kind of work. This is a precursor to another one that's called the Art of Coaching Teams, which I'm hoping to go to next year. But there were some great takeaways for me for this. And so I'm going to try to use some of those with y'all on these calls to give you also tools that might work well for you, right?
Excellent.
So go ahead, Paula, sorry.
Oh, no. I'm excited. That's I'm glad you were able to attend and share.
Me too. It was actually really good. And I learned a lot. And I think part of it that was so powerful for me was that I was, you know, sitting at a table and then in a room with 75 other coaches. And I really never find myself in a space where I'm surrounded by people that actually do the work that I do. And so reflecting with these people that are having the same conversations that we're having, and hearing how there was some role playing, which if you know me well, you know that I don't like that kind of stuff. Like I would rather not do that. I would rather just read about it. But, you know, and I think next time we get together, don't shoot me, but I think we might need to do some of this in our own coaching group, because what was really awesome was that we were given, you know, like 5 different blips of like potential clients or participants and what their major hangups were. And then you were in groups of 3, and one person was the client, one was a participant, and then there was an observer, and you went through a 20-minute coaching conversation. And what was really great about that was that I was able to reflect with those 2 other people. Like, what would you have said when you heard the client say this? You know, or I really liked when you did this. It was really validating to me to hear you say this. And so getting that kind of feedback, like especially very specific feedback about when I hear my clients say, everything is great, I don't need coaching. What do I say to that, right? And so being able to talk to people about those things and having those conversations, I thought was really powerful. And so the part that I'm putting on here, the coaching survival phrases and when to use them, and then the general coaching stems, like I feel like we all are really good at the work that we do. I feel like we know what to say, when to say it, but sometimes it is nice to have words that you can use when you hear things that you're not sure what to do with, right? And so like those 5 phrases, tell me more about, or I'm curious about, using that particularly, and I guess I should say some of these, when you read through them, you may feel like I would never in a million years say that. So what I would say is find a way to say them in your own authentic voice, but keeping the integrity of the thing. So which one was, there was one, I can't remember where it is now, but I remember reading that and being like, not a chance you're ever going to hear that come out of my mouth. There's no way I would ever say that. Maybe it was a different thing. But anyway, like learning to then write it basically in my own words and make it flow more succinctly out of my own mouth, I think is important. But the tell me more about, or I'm curious about, we all have had these conversations where somebody is saying something, but they're not saying something, right? So like they are being very, they're not coming forth with a lot of information. They're maybe not telling you how it worked in the class in a way that you want to hear about. Maybe the assessment data wasn't right. But anyway, tell me more about, I'm curious about, I heard you say, I would love to hear more about that. What would be more useful for us to talk about right now might be great when somebody's telling you a whole lot and you don't know where to go with it. Right? But when they just open and all of this stuff spills out and you've got a plan for the session with them, but they're in this space. I think that's one of those moments where you step back and you say, okay, what would be most useful for us to talk about right now? What do you need from me right now? And I think that's a really good one, because I think we've all had those kind of conversations, especially somebody's rambling and venting, and you don't really know where to go with it. Another along those same lines, another coach mentioned that they sometimes will say, okay, Natasha, you have 7 minutes. I'm going to give you 7 minutes to vent right now. And then when you're done with that, we're going to figure out where we need to go with that information and how we can move forward. Instead of just letting the conversation spin constantly around this negative event that happened. Maybe it's with the administration, maybe it was with the class or whatever. But I really liked that because that validates their feelings and their lived experiences. But it also says, that's it. That's what you get. Get it all out right now. And then we can. I thought that was great.
I like that.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, sorry, Susan, go ahead.
To give my students 30 seconds to a minute when they came in with like all this crazy energy, and I'd say, okay, now's your time.
Do it.
I said, you can throw things, you can cuss, you can stomp your feet, do whatever you want. You get 1 minute and then we're done.
Right.
And
Exactly.
they kind of sit there quietly. I was like, nope, get it out.
They're like, wait, I have this freedom? Yes, you have it, but not for long. So don't waste it. So what I'm hearing you say is, did I get that right? It sounds like, or is there anything else you want to add? This one's really useful if you, obviously you're demonstrating that you're listening well and you're using your active listening, which is great. Reflecting back what they've heard, especially if you've heard something that doesn't feel right, doesn't sit right, makes you question why they're using a TIPA tool, why they're speaking about a child in the way that they're speaking about a child, just reflecting back so that they can hear what you heard and making sure that they meant to say it in that way, and that they're reflecting on it. Same thing in number 4, what do you hear yourself saying? These are great if you have highly reflective learners. This can be great if somebody's super emotionally stressed. If somebody is emotionally distressed about something, asking them to stop and say, what do you hear yourself saying? Or, I don't know that I would say that one. I would be more like, so what I'm hearing you say is, that sounds more like what I would say as a coach. And I think it gets at the same thing, because then I can say, so what I'm hearing you say is that you don't think your students are high achievers or something along those lines. And then then the client can say, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Okay, well, that's one conversation. No, that's not what I'm saying. Okay, but that's what I'm hearing. So, like we're disconnected. And then number 5, is there a question you can think of that I could ask you right now that would be helpful? This one's really good if you're just stuck, right? Like you've tried everything you can do. This teacher is not budging. I am fine. Everything's fine. I've been doing it this way forever. Is there a question you can think of right now that I can ask you that would be helpful? Okay. Or if you get somebody that pushes back on every suggestion, and I know that I've had a couple of these. Well, this would have been good for you last year with your MVPS.
Thank you.
And then also this can help your learner feel more empowered, right? So like giving them a voice. What do they want you to ask them?
Mm-hmm.
And then the coaching stems, I'm not going to go through all of these. This was a fun exercise down here, and we can do this the next time we're together. But reading the coaching stems, figuring out which ones that you would use, and then using those in this table, right? When you hear a client say, the curriculum is not developmentally appropriate for these students, what do you say? But that's the way I've always done it. These kids can't do this. No one ever tells me when I'm doing anything right. Everything is going great. By the way, the everything is going great feature is like my biggest fear, because getting through to that person to admit that everything is not great and there's always room for improvement is a very, very hard thing to do, in my opinion. I would rather have the emotionally distressed, nobody ever thinks I'm doing anything right teacher than I have the everything is great cheerleader teacher. And then also I don't have time for science, right? This is a fun activity, and we can do this further because it's already 12:54, and I want to respect your time and have a few minutes for reflection. But yeah, we'll hold this for our next meeting together, and then I'll also talk about a couple other things that we did in this that are really helpful for me. Okay, thoughts, reflection.
I really appreciate this list, Shayna, and thinking of this in, again, kind of a meta way. What a valuable resource, not only for us, for teachers that are working with students, but for administrators that are working with teachers. This is very universal and applicable. I'm thinking, I want to, if you don't mind, copy this and give this to some of my corporate clients, because for them to have a list of words with how to communicate with their teams, very effective, because their roadblocks are often not knowing what to say. So I think this is really universal, and I appreciate that it's just tangible.
One word of caution. I was actually having a conversation yesterday, and I used one of the lines, and I got caught where I got with the response was, I attended that workshop. There's that kind of snarky, I've been there, I've done, so what? Yes, I'm not kidding. And it's in it. And
what was your line?
It's the one I'm hearing. I'm hearing, if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly. And I tried to, it's the active listening piece. And she stopped me in mid-sentence and said, I attended that workshop. Like, I know where you're going.
That comes from one singular word.
And I told her, I said,
multiple places.
I know. And I said,
right.
My response was, but it's, the point being, it's a good practice. If it was in a workshop, chances are it's a good practice. So I really need to know that I actually heard what you said so that I can support you. But anyway, you sometimes get that snarkiness a lot of times, especially with folks who have been in the trenches for a long, long time. They're a veteran teacher of 10, 15, 20 years. And which kind of being mindful of that. And I'm sure you've experienced this too. It varies from elementary to middle to high school. There's a range of responses you kind of need to be prepared for. That's all.
Yeah.
Susan, I know you mentioned this actual chart here, and I know the link that Shayna put in the email had 2 pages. I saw the 2-page coaching stems. There's also something called a mediational mat. It's kind of similar to this, but Susan mentioned her corporate clients and all of that, so it made me think of the mediational mat. But it's really similar to this. It's a little more concise, but that's something else that could be super simple, super quick for administrators and or corporate people to use.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I love most about these stems is that they are 100% coming from a place of non-judgment.
I agree.
All of them are seeking clarity in some way or another. And they're trying to figure out what the other person is experiencing. And so I think that's, for me, I can sometimes jump through and just try to fix things, right? Like, I hear that that's a problem for you. How can we fix it? When really what they need for me to say is, I hear that that's a problem for you. period.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
let them speak through that experience. And so that's something that I'm working on right now. But I'm going to try to incorporate a handful of these into my speech with my children, with my husband, because it doesn't only work at work. It's about building relationships that are based in trust. And that's
a great
where
point.
that comes from. And so being able to do that in all of our relationships, I think, is really important.
Mm-hmm.
But
I agree wholeheartely.
If I say to my husband, let me see if I understand what you're saying, he's going to be like, this is going to take a little time for me to adopt this with him in the heated moments. But I see that you're feeling very frustrated, Brad. Let's talk about that.
I'm feeling hungry.
Let's further explore this frustration.
Well, and we have 1 minute left, and I just wanted to see if anybody else had anything else to say or any other thoughts, any comments on how I can continue or be more supportive of you in the work that you're doing would also be welcome.
Nope.
Crickets.
Good. I know.
Okay. We're going to sit in that silence, Susan, aren't we?
Yes. Let's sit in the silence.
Nothing wrong with silence. All right. Well, it has been a pleasure, as always. Let me know how I can help. I will continually reach out to each of you when things come up that I think are appropriate for you. And you will definitely be hearing more from me this year than last. Again, Natasha, you have no experience with that, but it is a huge priority for me to stay connected with you in your work this year. So you will be hearing a lot. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everybody. It was fun listening
Nice
to in on that. So thanks for letting me in.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, Erin, hi.
Oh yeah, I was in it. I was listening. I didn't want to interfere. I was listening to it all. I do want to see. I'm not on my computer, so I didn't get to visually see this stuff. So I'm hoping Shanna can share it with me. Yes. But it was super cool to listen to you all go through. And just to be clear, I am going to use that with my husband. Like what I hear you saying is.
What I hear you saying. And thank you for sharing your thoughts. Can you tell me more about it?
Can you? And then what is he going to say to me, Shayna? Is he going to say, Erin, I'm not your employee, and you are not the executive director of this house.
Yes.
Which is what he usually tells me.
That's awesome.
There you go. Get some insight.
Yeah.
You guys all rock. Thank you so much. That was fun. Again, that was fun listening to.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye, guys.